Hello, everyone, and welcome to the public program of the Diasporic Schools. The Diasporic School is a project initiated by Kunstenfestival des Arts in Brussels, and with the Diasporic School, our festival commissioned and presented during the month of October 5 artistic projects by artists Bushra Khalidi, Otto Bonkanga, and Sandrine Haljasso, Christian Nyempeta, Yael Bartana, and Samah Hijawi and Rim Schiller. All the different projects produced during the month of October reflected on new forms of pedagogy and navigated through historic and present form of circulation of knowledge, specifically in diasporic context, and the idea of transmission of knowledge as a political and empowering tool. So the urgency of this project emerged from the reflection that, far from being a novelty of the time that we are living right now, remote transmission has always existed inside diasporic communities that were developing methods in sharing content and practicing care in condition of impossibility of physical proximity. So in this time of pandemic, the Diasporic Schools does not only acknowledge the possibility of learning in the diaspora, but also how to learn from it as a kind of model. All the information of the project are on our website, which is kfda.be, where you can also find information about the different projects, about the whole public program, which ends today with 2 more conversations, and then also together with a text, very beautiful text that was written by Cecilia Vicuna. So some of the projects during the Diasporic Schools function as classes, as weekly classes that were gathering participants from different regions of the world, such as the project of Christian Nyempeta that we had yesterday, and the one of Yael Bartana. First, I would like to introduce Yael Bartana, who's a visual artist born in Israel in 1970, and she works with film, with installation, and photography to explore the imaginary of identity through political imagination. And very often she takes as a starting point national consciousness and tradition, and she focuses on ceremony and public rituals that are intended to reaffirm the collective identity of the nation state. Yael Bartana represented Poland in the 54th Venice Biennial in 2011, and her latest work is an ongoing project started in 2016, What If Women Rule the World, where she combined fictional setting and real-life participant exploring possible alternatives to a world dominated by men and the traditional perception of power. So once a week during the month of October, Yael Bartana created every Monday a Shofar School. So the shofar is an instrument made of ram's horn, as an instrument played in different moments of the Jewish calendar, and an almost iconic element of Judaism and among its diasporic communities. So somehow the very history of the shofar is linked to the need for communication for a distance. It is said that it was used to communicate between a remote mountain village as a warn of the sighting of the new moon. But its loud sound is also strongly bound up in the history of the diaspora, and the fact that in several circumstances and for centuries, Jewish people risked their life in order to exit the obligation of listening to the call of the shofar. The specificity of the project investigates who is able to blow the shofar, and the fact that blowing the shofar is seen in Judaism a very honorable task, and historically nowadays the blowing of the shofar is subject to normative criteria, and although women are not prohibited from playing the instrument, it is an honor that is somehow reserved for men. So that's where, for the Diasporic School, Bartana created an online platform to connect people in the Jewish diaspora interested in Judaism, regardless of gender, to learn how to blow the shofar, and selected through an open call and based in different regions of the world, from Brussels to Berlin to Milan to Marseille to Sao Paulo, Utrecht, Tbilisi, of San Francisco. The participants met once a week to learn to play the shofar, to share stories, and to discuss the shofar through the topic of diaspora, gender, identity, or animal right. So this public conversation is an occasion to share the process of this school, and I'm joined in this conversation by David Bernstein, who was one of the participants of the Shofar School. David Bernstein is an artist born in San Antonio, Texas, and based in Brussels and Amsterdam. And he combines performances, sculpture, writing to tell stories through objects. And his projects deal with a range of subjects from psychology, wellness, fetishism, and spirituality. So next to his individual practice, he also collaborates with a variety of people, especially in the Cosmic Cowboy Collective Self-Luminous Society. And in 2016, he completed a postgraduate residency at Jan van Eyck in Maastricht, and before that an MFA at Sandberg Institute in Amsterdam. So maybe I will start directly with you, David, in unpacking a bit how was the Shofar School, and how did you decide to participate in it, and what was your experience in it?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here and to join in this conversation with Yael. She's coming soon. And I have here the shofar that the Kunsten Festival des Arts sent to each of the participants. And as you see it from the RAM, I think it's important that we have this object present in this conversation so that it's not just an abstract description, but actually a tangible thing. So I was recommended by a friend to look into this Shofar School. So he thought it would be something interesting for me. I always felt as a sense of being an outsider within society, within Judaism, because I grew up in the smallest synagogue in San Antonio, Texas, which already has a small Jewish community. And I grew up in a synagogue that was Reconstructionist. So this is a form of Judaism that grew out of the United States in the 1950s and eventually in the 60s became settled as an actual denomination of Judaism. And some call it a kind of hippie form of Judaism. So it's one of the forms that first had female rabbis and had the bat mitzvah and was progressive in its ideas and how it relates to contemporary ideas in society, but still maintaining traditions from the past. So it sees the religion as something living. And so to approach the Shofar School, which was grounded in questions of feminism and ways of approaching a Jewish spiritual object in a new way, seemed something really close to me, something that interested me as you mentioned in the introduction, that I work a lot with objects. So I'm always interested to see what other ways we can think of how we can use them and what they can mean today, and especially outside of a strictly Jewish context. Mm-hmm. And also, one last thing, I was also just very curious to meet the rest of the group. So that was really something curious for me and really a pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And somehow, while Yael is also, we are still waiting for Yael joining us, but somehow before starting, I think that in the idea of Yael, there was also kind of trajectory between the traditional way in which the shofar is used and how to twist its narrative, how to reappropriate it, how to queer the shofar, as she might describe it later, and how to imagine to use it for new purposes and new narratives. And somehow I was interested as well in proposing you, David, to go through as well this art that was designed in playing the shofar, because you were one of the participants who played as well, who learned how to blow the shofar during the school, and maybe seeing if you would be fine in starting with the traditional way in which the shofar is usually played. And I will also put the ram to clarify what kind of animal it is.
So the traditional way is blown in 3 blasts, and in the synagogue it's blown on the New Year celebration, and then also it's blown again on Yom Kippur, which is a holiday of the Day of Forgiveness, of asking for forgiveness, and it's usually around a week after the New Year. It's blown on that day at the very end of fasting. So the blowing is 3 different ways of blowing because there's only one note for the shofar. You can kind of variate the pitch a bit, but the 3 notes, there's one which is the single blast, then there's a 3 blast, and then there's one with a staccato rhythm of 9 blasts. And so this is kind of a wake-up call, as it's thought of. It's sort of the sound wakes you up to the moment and to announce the new year. So maybe you can help me by announcing the 3 different blasts, and I will blow one. After you announce each one, I will blow it.
Yep, I have it written here. So the first one, it's Tekiya. Then Shvarim. And then the Trua. Perfect, thanks. So in speaking about the procedure about the Shofar School, as we were saying, there's this kind of idea of bringing a kind of narrative from the tradition, but also how the shofar has been used in political narratives and how to open up new forms of narrative in relation to gender and forms of national identity. And one of the school had a teacher, Miriam Camerini, who brought as well, who's studying to become a rabbi, a female rabbi, so who's brought all the traditional aspects of knowing as well what's how the use of the shofar is inscribed in the in Judaism. And I would like to open up one element which was at the well, at the beginning of the idea of Yael of creating this school was a kind of specific episode that I would like to recall. For Yael, there was some month ago, she was interested in the fact that she read about rabbis from helicopter that were using the shofar and the blowing of the shofar to protect communities from COVID-19, from coronavirus. So that was somehow the beginning of the whole project, the idea of how this traditional instrument was used in an idea of protection and the idea of sound as a form of protection, starting from a contemporary situation. And I will first of all introduce Yael, and then we can maybe see the video together. Hello, Yael.
Hi, sorry.
Hello.
We were just like about to discuss like the very origin of your interest and the information you read about rabbis blowing the shofar from helicopter. I don't know if you want to comment on this.
So you said that already?
Yeah.
You talked about it already? Okay.
Yeah.
And did you show the video? No.
No. I'm sure.
Ah, okay.
Perhaps you can just introduce a little bit how you found this and what did you think about this video?
Yeah. So I came across this article during the beginning of the pandemic, and I read and I found it quite interesting that during the pandemic there is maybe it's this alternative way of thinking how to fight the pandemic. and also maybe not having much trust in the regime to find solutions, and in science, so finding a spiritual way to and come together and blow the shofar as an attempt to fight. So I found it quite interesting way of reappropriating the shofar and using it regardless. It wasn't the New Year. So
Shall we watch the video?
Yeah.
And so,
okay, it's hard to see that, but this is actually they're all sitting in a helicopter, and I guess at some point they took off and hovered above Jerusalem. I couldn't find this material, but it's all I could find.
And then, can you say a little bit about how this led to the creation of the Shofar School?
So it begins with this. So I often think of how I can relate to Jewish history or my personal history in relation to Judaism, and how I can find my point of view, how to enter and how to kind of intervene in the kind of what is traditionally known as or myth or story, and is somehow very much connected to my interest in finding my point of view. So the personal resonance. So how can I tackle a very, very simple like the ritual, which is traditionally known and as a ritual connected to the Rosh Hashanah, so the beginning of New Year. So I wanted to use this invitation by the festival to create a platform in which we rethinks about the shofar as in a different context. What are the potential of using this very simple object in a different context? And also historically is known as shofar as connecting people, and so it's another very simple way also to connect among people, and that was sort of the starting point to create. And also my activities as an artist also is often to also create think tank theaters or to create different platforms to which I invite people to bring their own personal experience, expertise, or professional expertise. And I thought this would be an interesting way to start a conversation around this very object, and what are the potentiality of thinking, rethinking how we can use the shofar today. So that how it started.
Would you be willing to briefly say what your own spiritual or religious background is, just to give us sort of grounding to how you approach this, or how you? Yeah, I think maybe.
Well, yeah, for me, I guess I used to call myself an amateur anthropologist, meaning that I observe social behavior, social constructed rituals or state rituals, and often I was the outsider to the event and trying to study through that how that event identity, my identity. So I guess, I mean, I would say I'm one of the product of Zionism that disconnected me from my diasporic roots. So my family comes from East Europe, but I was never really, in my upbringing, I was very much not interested in that history. But as I grew older, I was starting to find it, to understand the kind of mechanism and the system in which I grew up and indoctrinated, and really far from this culture and religion. And I think I'm actually come from a background that is religious and very much upbringing of very, let's say, Zionist family, but within this exploring my history, my personal history, I try to kind of open up and create counter narrative. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I wanted to mention a quote from the podcast Judaism Unbound about Jewish technology, which I think is an interesting idea that they bring up in relation to what happened at the Shofar School. So they have the quote, "Studying texts, rituals, and ideas from the past is a Jewish technology because it allows us to invent by reusing and reframing the past into new ideas and rituals. Not only can we discard things that no longer work, but we can reach deep into the past and pull things forward that may work again." I see the Shofar School as practicing this idea by twisting the meanings and uses of the shofar. We were speaking just before you came with Daniel about the idea of queering the shofar, and he brought up Sarah Ahmed's idea of queering use. So I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you now see the shofar differently after experiencing the Shofar School and leading this project?
So, I mean, I started, let's say, if we take this notion of queering the shofar, already began that in doing so in, again, as inspiration from the helicopter event with the Kabbalist blowing the shofar. There was a project with Baden-Baden, the Kunsthalle, where I was invited by the two new directors, Chala and Adnan, to bless the new directorship, so the new building and the new directors. So and through the shofar we create an act of blessing the new space. And the plan was actually to hover with the helicopter and blow the shofar from the helicopter, but the plan didn't really work. So I invited a musician to blow the shofar on the top roof, on the rooftop of the building, and the sound was actually amplified, and at 7 o'clock in the morning with the sunrise, as a form of creating a ritual that is not specifically has to do with a new year, but a new era for the building. So and this sort of introducing this ritual in the context of is already an act, and I feel like the participants, I feel like they're already practicing, and they're already in a process of thinking differently about the potentiality of using the shofar in their own, in different ways. Also for you, it was, I guess you can also talk about your understanding, or what is it for you? Where are you thinking differently about the shofar and its history and?
Yeah, I think over the course of the class of the 4 weeks that we met, I began to think more about ways that I could sort of make it my own, or find my own way to queer the shofar. Of course, inspired a lot by what the other participants were bringing. But I think in the beginning, I was just thinking a lot about the normative uses of it being used in the synagogue, the idea of the performer, the listener, the one who calls out, and the one who responds. This idea of a tool that only really appears one time of the whole year. So it has this sort of value because it's something we're waiting for, and then we hear it, and the sound has this kind of animalistic rawness to it. So those were sort of my beginning thoughts around the shofar. And I was thinking about the video that you showed during the course of the in 67, I think, is that it? Mm-hmm. And how that video also in a way was a kind of normative queering of the shofar, or like going to another dominant narrative of Zionism and how the shofar was used. Do you think we can watch that clip now, and also your intervention on that clip?
Mm-hmm.
אנחנו יושבים על הרכב שצופה לעיר העתיקה, ועוד מעט אנחנו עומדים להיכנס אליה. העיר העתיקה של ירושלים, שמאז כל הדורות חותמים עליה ושואפים אליה. אנחנו נהיה הראשונים להיכנס אליה. הטנקים של איתן מתקדמים משמאל וייכנסו לשער האריות. לנוע אל השער. מסדר הסיום יהיה על הרחבה למעלה. עד כאן עבור.
עומדים מתחת לשער האריות. שער מטלימפול. אני רואה מההפגזות שהיו כאן. צרכנים מסתתרים ליד הכתלים. אני נצמד לאחד הכתלים. בוא. אנחנו הולכים ומעמיקים בתוך העיר העתיקה.
הר הבית בידינו, כאן תלמיד, הר הבית בידינו. לראות בעצם כמעט, כל הכבוד, כל הכבוד. חדל, כל הכוחות חדל. לחנות תמיד, כאן תלמיד, כל הכוחות חדל לתפרו. כאן קודקוד 8-9, האם מוטה מדבר? עבור. אין כמוך על יד מסגד עומר. אני נוסע במהירות לשער האריות 100% סוף.
אנחנו בתוך העיר העתיקה. החיילים צמודים לקירות.
תגיד איפה הכותל, איך הולכים?
אני יורד ברגע זה אני יורד במדרגות אל הכותל. אינני אדם דתי, מעולם לא הייתי, אבל זהו הכותל, ואני נוגע באבני הכותל המערבי.
ברוך אתה אדוני מנחם ציון ובונה ירושלים. לשנה הזאת בירושלים הבנויה.
Can you tell us a little bit what we were just watching? I don't know if you heard my question I just asked. Would you be willing to just share a little bit what we just watched, and what did you think about it?
the Israeli military is occupying the old city and entering to the old town and arriving to the Wailing Wall. He's our friend.
And so what was the how was
so it's historically that during the British Mandate, actually the shofar was not allowed to be blown next to the Wailing Wall. So to kind of try to sort of control the tension between the Jewish and Arab population. So this was a strong moment, to claim the Wailing Wall and make it Jewish again. So
it makes me think of one of the guests that you brought to the school, the historian Tamar Novik. She spoke about the importance of sheep to the Israeli identity and how the shepherd symbolically represented Israelis becoming native in Palestine, and how blowing the shofar took on this meaning of anti-diaspora because they were no longer wandering. They had now claimed the place. So in the context of the Diasporic Schools, I'm also curious if you think the shofar can challenge this meaning or reverse this this narrative or understanding of the shofar.
I think what we basically tried to do is it was for me to invite Tamar was to really remember that the shofar is connected to an animal. As we see here, that's why the picture appear, and it was important for me to really think about humanity and how we are so easily using the animals into our own needs and rituals and belief system. And then it was of course interesting to think through, Tamar, about the whole creation of the new Jew and the arrival from the diaspora to the promised land, and this kind of the fantasy about the promised land and the empty land, which of course wasn't empty, as an act of occupying and then claiming also what was already there, shepherd, and this all the exotic image of the Palestinians, kind of also claiming that as the Jewish. The new Jew. I think it was quite interesting for the topic. So I think somehow to understand how can we kind of relate to the shofar today? I mean, what is it? It's more also an open question. How can we? What is the analogy for today?
I'm thinking
so
about...
we are not staying in this kind of patriarchal and the storytelling that we are so used to, as we kind of to break these orders and to claim something different.
I was thinking about one of the participants, Ani Abigazi. I'm really forgetting how to say her family name. She is now in a residency in San Francisco, in an area with a former military base. And she brought up in the first session, we talked about the origin of the shofar as coming from mentions in the Torah, as in the story of the Battle of Jericho, that multiple people blew the shofar collectively to take the wall down. And she was interested in this also sort of like blowing the shofar from inside to take the walls down from the inside of a place. And she made this video work that she shared with us of her blowing the shofar inside the walls of this former military base. So I thought it's very interesting how the shofar both as the religious object, also has a very strong history and link to military, to conquest, but at the same time to also waking oneself up. So also kind of whistleblowing, as Solange mentioned as well during the course. One thing that I wanted to ask you, I don't know if maybe you want to comment on that, or if you have any other thoughts about the relationship of the shofar to military or to taking down walls.
I mean, of course, what I liked about the video that the shofar disappeared and also only the sound exists. So in her video, so we stay only with the sound. That is, the kind of the clearly limitations of the shofar sound and this kind of what is the idea is to somehow to amplify, right? Amplify the and also to think of in the context of the shofar, so to think about the emotions that it provokes and the memories that the shofar, I'm sure for some people provoke kind of trigger memories. And I think that was, this abstract use of the shofar in this context, I think, worked quite well. But also, can we? What else can we? It was constantly there was the return. We kind of during the Shofar School we try to base our knowledge connected to the Mishnah and the Talmud and the understanding and reading and trying to anchor it in this knowledge. But for me, it was also the point of the queering or the twisting or what is the how can we relate to it in a different way today.
Yeah, there's a kind of a fictional graph that I heard about. It's called the curve of knowledge versus chutzpah. So it's as knowledge increases, perhaps the chutzpah decreases. In a sense, the chutzpah to innovate and to change the structure of Judaism itself. So perhaps those who even maybe are less learned, are less steeped in the ways that we should practice the religion, have a freedom to think of new ways to use the religion. And I was really happy that within the school that there was also this sense of many different backgrounds, from people who have like 4 generations before them Jewish backgrounds to people who are not Jewish at all but are just curious to learn more and to be find their own way of relating, like Beth in Brazil, who has an African background, and she relates to it also as a musician. Yeah, I don't know, what do you think about this knowledge versus chutzpah curve?
I don't know. I don't know really what it means, but I think for me it's interesting would be to shift our position, our roles, and I would really like to. I don't know if you talked a lot about it, but about your interest to join the school, because you come from a very specific and interesting background, and I think it will be interesting for the audience to hear. What made you join, and what were your expectations, and how this kind of tool of because it's very challenging. Most people do not know each other, and what can we learn from such a platform of education and exchanging knowledge, exchanging experiences, the limitation, and do you think it's something that you will actually use it for your practice or in the future? Did actually start a window of opportunities
Well, I think that artists have a certain way of abstracting from what we know to open things up, to queer things, and to create new narratives and new ways of thinking on all kinds of subjects. And I definitely feel this way towards objects. And I for a long time, I was removed from religion because even though I grew up in this very open-minded form of Judaism, I still felt oppressed by the idea of belief, which I remember saying as well during the Shofar School, that like this idea that I need to believe in God. And if I don't believe in God, then why am I even spending any time with this religion? And then I moved to New York, and a friend told me about a synagogue there with a lesbian rabbi and a lot of activists and a very radical community. And I went there, and on their website they said not believing in God is also a part of Judaism. So this becoming more knowledgeable about these other forms of Judaism liberated me to also try to find my own way to relate to the religion and become more and more curious about it. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about and comment kind of in what you were just saying is that you, with the Shofar School, you brought together Jewish people in the arts diaspora. And I thought this is very interesting because typically when Jewish people are brought together, whether they're artists or not, that happens from a Jewish institutional context, from a synagogue, from a Jewish community center or Jewish museum. But this group was brought together through an arts organization that is not related to religion. And I had a feeling that they somehow liberated something by being brought together in this way. And that actually we feel no expectation of religiosity or of any pressure to belong to a local Jewish community. So that's something very unique. And it also made me think that what you and the Kunst Festival des Arts created was perhaps even a new form or a new type of Jewish space. So I'm curious if you think what we did at the Shofar School was actually practicing Judaism in another way.
I think it depends. I think the act of writing stories that we each as individual can write our own story related to the shofar will actually liberate. But I agree that having something to talk about Judaism in the context of a festival that actually discuss new ways of thinking of the diaspora that has of course it is liberating, but I feel like I've been doing it also in a previous work, creating a fictional movement of the Jewish Renaissance movement in Poland, which is of course it is creating a massive fictional return of Jews back to Poland, which is, of course, is framed as a diaspora because it's the imagination. So, I mean, I wanted to kind of open up the kind of the reader. So for very Zionism, what happens when we go back to Europe and we fill the void? So I think for me the Shofar School is I feel like it's a starting point for really you know, with I think if we could actually extend it for even longer time to arrive to discussions that are beyond the Jewish diaspora, to really see the political sphere today, to the rise of fascism and the discourse of racism and anti-Semitism, and we could create this shofar as a really as a blowing the shofar to discuss other topic. I think this will be extremely interesting, and I don't know if you can maintain it. I mean, we all without the framing, but yes, this
Well, I think it's very interesting in this moment because a lot of synagogues have moved towards Zoom. So the necessity towards physical presence within a Jewish community is becoming less and less important. I know that my parents' synagogue, they are doing it on Zoom, and I've joined them for a few sessions, and friends of theirs from across United States have also joined them. So there's something very interesting. But what I return to again is that what I felt liberated is that we were not basing our Jewish school on a specific relationship to Judaism. It was really open to being a really diverse relationship to it, but at the core was a certain way of being open to exploring the potential of the shofar. And I think that's really, really valuable. Also really valuable outside of our context and valuable for the Jewish community and the Jewish diasporic community at large. I told the anecdote during the school about being at a Jewish New Year party at a friend's house here in Brussels, and one woman there who was not Jewish asked, "Are you gonna stay up till midnight?" And I thought it's really nice because she didn't know that in Judaism the day begins and ends at sunset. But it made me think, yeah, but maybe if you are not celebrating the New Year in a synagogue context, perhaps you can appropriate some of the other forms of celebrating New Year, like to blow the shofar exactly at the time of sunset and to make a new ritual out of that. And that also led me to think about a way that I could do something myself in the future and use the shofar outside of institutional context. I'm thinking I would really like to share this Morse code shofar blowing, and then also to open it up to questions, in case anybody has any questions that they would like to ask. They can just write it in the chat and it will appear for us, and then we can answer them and talk about them. Is there something more that you would like to add before I blow this last shofar blast?
We wanted to maybe show the reverse.
Oh yeah, I think that's also a nice way of putting a kind of parentheses on this discussion.
Boris Talmidum Smila Yaka, Akitafri Dachot Buntana. Osuchem, Toya, Sheturin, Nidaya Sonina. Vamos, Taila, Homagne, Ato. Ora, Reba de Matom, Mia, Ashiet, Benom, Shidor, Togenar.
kita reago אני דימנו מחלוק ميلة داخل نفسينا ميلة هذا يمي رتسمي هناك يشتصك عميري لو في مثل راش ويرى راش الغدي
على مرا فخلاهي مو يهاتف وعاشق ناولنا نابلنا بطي راش الوسلقية نرد مسلمين ذكر ناكيلش نيكمتا عائلة خير لتيمين وشراي نمخنا عائلة ميخا وشراي لمين مخطوط وضربت ناعلش ميالش ويشاك التاريخ عائلة خير لتيمين وضربت ناعلش عائلة التاريخ ليه فتح سيخر لمين شيرانا
Very uncanny experience to watch. Can you say a little bit about what we just watched?
So this is a reversed of the archival. I think it's self-explanatory what is done there.
Yeah, it's very
like using the shofar to announce a return. No, it's like going backwards.
Yeah, it's something that we spoke about towards the very end of the Shofar School, is the twisting shape of the shofar itself and the relationship of spirals within the Jewish religion and the idea of spirals within time, and how Judaism sees time as this repetition that is coming back to itself, a bit as in the Eastern philosophical traditions, but then always hopefully better than we were at that same point before. And then we can see that spiral within the shape of the Torah. You can see it in the sideburns of Hasidic men with the payas, and in the wrapping of the leather, in the tefillin prayer, and again with the shofar, and also braiding with the challah and the Havdalah candle. And so it makes a lot of sense to invert time as well, as a way. It fits very well. Also makes me think of what Miriam said about the Mishnah and the etymology of going back in time, so that we are constantly going backwards and forwards and pulling out new ideas. And I wanted to blow the shofar, and then we can go to any questions that we may have. I want to be mindful also of your time. So I was inspired by Solange and Annie's contributions to the Shofar School. Solange, who's in Brazil, was talking about the berrante, which is this horn that's blown by ranchers, sort of cowboys there, and that it's they blow very specific calls that have specific meanings, like it's lunchtime, or I don't remember, bring something that I need, or now we're going to go do this. And I thought it's really interesting. Of course, the shofar already has a certain code where each blast has a specific meaning, but I thought I would like to encode into Morse code a statement that my mother told me about, which comes from Mordechai Kaplan, who is one of the founders of Reconstructionist Judaism. And the quote is, "The past has a vote, not a veto." So the past has a saying in how we are today, but it doesn't have a veto. It doesn't have the ability to force us to be a certain way. We can take from the past, but we can also make it what we want to make it today. So I encoded this into Morse code, and I will blow it now on the shofar.
It's quite intense, this coding you're creating. Can you explain how what was your technique? How did you actually?
Well, I just went online to Morse code generator and just typed in the sentence, but it was interesting to read about the history of Morse code as one of the very first abstractions of language into electronic transmission. So in the 1840s, with the telegram, it was making little marks onto strips of tape. And I like this idea of like this ancient technology that simultaneously is sort of basis of binary that leads us to the futuristic technology of computers and the internet. And yeah, and something that Daniel said, I also appreciated that by blowing this sentence, I'm actualizing the idea of it. So if there are any questions, you can type that into the chat. Otherwise, we can thank you for your time. I know that you're very strict with your.
Sorry, yes, I have to leave. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you so much for your time, your answer.
And we will blow the shofar and.
Oh yeah, one last thing is that there will be continuation of the Diasporic Schools. So that will be happening now at 6 p.m. with Otobong Nakanga and Sandrine Onliaso, and moderated by Diana Campbell Betancourt. And after that, at 7:30, there will be a further talk with Miko Revereza. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, Daniel. And sorry, I have to leave, but you can stay maybe for the public.
Take care.